Hafaday, good evening. This informational briefing by the Committee on Housing, Utilities, Public Safety, and Homeland Security is now called to order. It is now 5:34 p.m. For the record, and in accordance with 5 GCA Chapter 8, Subsection 8107, notices were sent out via email to all senators and all main media broadcasting outlets on Wednesday, March 15, 2017, and the second notice on Friday, March 17, 2017. With me today are Senators, my Vice Chair, Vice Speaker Talahi, and Senator Regine Biscoli. Thank you, Senators, for being here. The purpose of this informational briefing is to help the regarding water rates and quality of service. This is the fourth of a series of meetings that we've held. Today's informational briefings will follow up on some lines of questioning that started in previous briefings, with including the system development charge. We have with us here today Mr. Joey Duenas, Mr. Miguel Verdalio, Mr. Greg Cruz, Mr. Joe San Nicolas, Mr. Ron Tapasnia, Mr. Kelly Clark, and Mr. Simon Sanchez. Also, Mr. Fred Harecki and Mr. John Borja. I'd like to invite the CCU members and GWA members. And also, if there's room for Mr. Harecki, would you like to be, perhaps you could provide some insight, or are you just here as a spectator? Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay. Good evening, gentlemen. So we're just going to go with simple questionings, just to understand the system development charges, where it came from, and also review the Island Water and Sewer Development Fund, so just so we can understand that as well, okay? So I'll just start out with, not unless you have anything prepared, I'll just start out with basic questioning. Okay, so one of the questions we had, looking at in previous meetings was, how was GWA charging for off-site costs of new service connections prior to the system development charge? Anyone can answer.
I'm not sure, Senator, so I know that the system development charge was the first time a fee was imposed.
Right.
So I don't think a fee was imposed prior to that. And I think some of the genesis, and you may want to also speak with Senator Atta, who was the author of the actual law. Some of the genesis of the thinking was we realized that the whole system had been undercapitalized, and part of it is this whole issue that as the system grows, who should pay for the growth that is caused by that growth, right? Mm-hmm. And so the theory of growth causing growth, the existing ratepayers have paid for the system that already exists. And then, over years, you add 500 houses, 1,000 houses, commercial growth, and you have to put money in to provide for that growth so that you're not taxing the existing ratepayer, because they're not causing the growth, right? We're already paying, all of us are already paying for the system that already exists. 10 years from now, when there's another 1,000 structures, we're going to have to make that system grow. So one way you pay for that is you ask those that are causing the growth to pay a system expansion, a system development charge. It's a common policy. So prior to this, I'm not sure if there was a system development charge at all. But one reason it came into play was the recognition that rate increases alone aren't enough, and it's not fair to penalize existing ratepayers to pay for growth they didn't cause. They paid for the system that the growth is adding on to, so at least can growth contribute. And so like now, and Miguel can give you further details, we have about $9 or $10 million of system development charge to put into the CIPs for system expansion. That's, as the law requires, we get the PUC to review it, sign off to make sure it's for expansion as opposed to operations or things that are not related to growth. And then we spend that money, and it's part of our current CIP plan that we have shown to you previously. It's about $9 or $10 million to be spent the next few years.
A little over 9 million.
And that's money we didn't borrow. We didn't need a rate increase. It's paid for that by people that have added to the system since 2000, when the law came into place. And the PUC did a study. They said, well, how do you charge for the water side? How do you charge for the wastewater side? So there was a cost of service study done by the PUC consultant, and GWA participated, and from that came a recommendation for the rates that are being charged. And I don't think the rates have changed since the inception, but those rates came from a system study that said the cost of incremental growth for so much capacity is about, I think it came out to, is it 6,000 for water and 3,000 for wastewater, or I think it's the other way around, for typical residential. But they came up with a cost of service study that set the amounts. PUC reviewed it, they approved it, and it's that rate that we charge new customers that are hooking up to the system. Now that's the system development charge. Large developments in particular can also be asked to invest additional dollars, like in Jonestown, when those 3 towers were built. In addition to the system development charge, they had to put in about $3 to $4 million of sewer and water lines because there was no way Jonestown's pressure could handle 3 more towers. So they upgraded, nor could the sewer. So that was on top of the system development charge, and it was assessed, and they put it in. So, and again, that whole concept of growth can't make it worse for existing ratepayers, and we need to put away some money from the growth as we add customers and structures to the system to pay for making more wells drilled, making a transmission line bigger, a sewer capacity bigger. That's the concept of it, and that's how we've been using it.
Okay. And when did GWA begin to charge for installation costs?
Installation.
What year, roughly?
Are you referring to the system development charges? When did they begin to charge for that?
No, this is a separate, right? Your installation costs? Because you have 2 separate fees, installation.
You mean like the meters and the cost of hooking up the account and the incidental costs?
I'm talking about installation costs. Doesn't GPI have 2 different charges when, like, if I build a home, you have the installation costs?
There's several
de-
charges, including a meter cost and an application fee, and those
Do you
are.
call it installation costs?
I don't believe we do.
Mr. Cruz?
Sorry.
Sorry, Mr. Berdalio, I saw him shaking his head. Yes.
There is an installation cost separate from the meter cost that
Thank
the
you.
customers pay. Yes.
Okay. And when did GWA start charging for installation costs?
Since ever since.
Yeah, it's
Senator,
it's been in our tariff
for a long time, for quite a few years. It's been there for a long time.
The
That's
price has
always been
changed.
there.
Okay.
The rates may have changed over time,
But it's been there.
but
Okay.
it's always been there. And
Okay.
it addresses certain things, such as when you come in, if you're a brand new customer, you're setting up a customer relationship. So it's to deal with the administrative cost of establishing an account, much the same way other companies do it. And then if you've built a new house and there has to be a meter put in,
Yes.
there's a charge for
Okay.
that.
Thank you. And is the SDC, the system development charge, charged on top of the installation costs?
Yes, because they're 2 separate things.
Okay.
The installation cost deals with the normal course of business. When somebody comes in, applies for an account, you establish an account. So there are some administrative costs involved. And if it's a brand new house that's being built, there is a charge for the meter because you're installing a brand new meter. Okay. In addition to that, the system development charge is on top of that because, as Simon alluded, as Commissioner Sanchez alluded, when the next 1,000 houses get built, those 1,000 houses will necessitate the drilling of another well maybe, or will necessitate a new tank, or will necessitate other infrastructure upgrades to accommodate the next 1,000 houses. So they're 2 separate things to address 2 separate issues,
Okay.
if that helps.
Yes. And just to be clear, the system development charge that was mandated by the legislature in 2010 by PUC decision and order is a separate schedule of charges.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's not charged to, for example, I sold my house and I bought a new house, there's no system development charge when I move, okay?
Okay.
Because but if I build a brand new house, there would be a system development charge. And the system development charge is based on the meter size.
Okay.
So therefore, bigger systems.
So if it's just a house, they're all the same. If it's the same,
The residences,
similar capacity, right?
Yeah, residences which are 3/4-inch meters would probably be all the same system development charge. I don't know off the top of my head what that charge is, to be honest with you. But so you know,
Yes.
it would change.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Duenas.
Sure.
So just to expand a little bit more, expenditures from the Island Water and Sewer Development Fund, and this is from 12 GCA, Chapter 12. Are to be reported annually to the PUC. In the previous informational briefings, did we hear correctly that you are now only compiling a list of capital improvement projects to be funded by the SDC, which is the system development charge?
No, I mean, our CIP plan in 2014, you know, remember, it just started in 2010, 2011, so
Right.
there wasn't a lot in there. But in 2014, the 5-year CIP plan started to spend it, and as it's been updated every year, it's in the 2017 CIP plan we've shared with you earlier.
Okay.
We've got about $9 million that's ready to spend. You know, some of it too, and Miguel can talk about it more, is you need enough money to do something, right? Sometimes you can't just throw $9 million at everything, right? So depending on the project, it's better to do a 5 and a 4 than 18 $500,000 things, right? It doesn't work like that. So
Okay.
So there are projects identified in the CIP, which I think you've already been provided a copy
Yes.
of. It identifies line items that, CIP line items that identify as a funding source an estimated amount of the SDCs to provide funding for that particular project.
Right.
Those are in
Right,
that's in
it
the
was-
CIP.
Yes,
right?
yes, and it was kind of a little. Some of it was pretty general, so I just kind of wanted to understand it because in paragraph 9 of the PUC decision and order, to support it, do those projects conform with for users who are for the first time to build? Are those projects specifically for that? Or
They're
are
not,
you,
they are not specific
They're-
to individual projects. It's specific to the system to add capacity.
okay, because essentially it says here, the Island Water and Sewer Infrastructure Development Fund shall only be expended for costs associating with construction, expansion, upgrade, and repair of wastewater and water facilities for users who are for the first time connecting property into the Guam's water system, or for builders if the density of development on existing connection is increased. So I'm asking, does it go back to these first-time users, or are you using it for building water tanks?
It
It
does
depends. It could be a variety of things. What you have to understand is that the people who are first-time people, who are the people who are causing the growth, they don't grow only in one area. They grow island-wide. So therefore, it'd be nice if Guam were parceled out and we said, okay, this is one part, and then there's the next part that we're going to allow development on, and therefore, what would we do? We'd build pipes there, we'd build water tanks there, would be pumps there, but that's not the way it works. The island is one community, and a house may be built in Dedido, down in Jotnya, over in Umatic. So what you try to do is take your best efforts to match the growth and to say, okay, this area in Jigo and Manilo is growing faster. We may need to put another storage tank in that area. That's what you take the money to use. It's not identified with these particular 500 homes that paid a system development charge. They paid especially just for that tank. You know, you
Yes.
can't match it like that.
And
Okay,
and
well,
some of it
let-
some of it happens organically too, as the chair just said. if 500 structures are built in Dededo, then you're going to get 500 system development charges from Dededo, and the chances are we're going to add a well in Dededo, right? As opposed to do something in Molesu when they only added 50 houses in 5 or 10. So growth, the money that is paid, while we look at it system-wide, sometimes very organically, if most of the money is coming from the north, that's where we're going to have to spend the money to serve the demand. So it's going to get most of the SDC.
Okay.
But it's great, and we can report to you, and we have to report to the PUC when we start spending it, and they have to actually agree that that's a valid spend. So, there's a good process that is doing exactly what you're doing, looking at it. How does it work? Is it going?
Yeah.
How's it being applied?
Well, it just appeared that the system development charge was intended by law to be expended for the direct benefit of those paying into the fund, right? And not to or to globally replace individual installation charges, and not to be an additional charge. So I'm just trying to understand that the approach here. And I understand that you're also using it as a capital improvement project funding source. So
Well,
That's the only thing you can use it for.
When you
expand
have
capacity.
when you have new customers that come online that add to the growth of your community, then you have to grow the capital expenditures because you have to put in more infrastructure. So that's exactly where it goes. Now, you cannot, I don't think you could match and say, well, this system development charge was charged on this house in Jotnya, and it's going to pay for that one piece of equipment right there next to them in Jotnya. That's not the way it works. So we try to, as the money comes in, if the bulk of the houses are being built in Dededo, that's where the bulk of the money will be spent, because you may need another well, you may need additional storage capacity, you may need to put in more pipes. I'm not the expert I'm not the engineer, but that's the whole concept. Okay?
Okay, and then just to reiterate, our last informational briefing, we talked about how much money is in the system development charge, right?
Yeah.
So how many millions of dollars are currently available now?
It's approximately $9 million available now.
$9 million.
Yes.
So you expended the $2 million from the previous, before it was like $11 million. So in the past month, you've managed to obligate and execute that $2 million difference?
No, we have not spent any of the SDC revenues that we've collected since the establishment and inception of the SDC program.
Oh, so you have not spent any money since the inception of SDC program?
Yes.
We're getting ready to.
I see.
Okay.
When do we start spending?
And Senator, we'll double check the numbers, but I think Greg is right. It's 9 million. I don't know. Maybe somebody else mentioned
No.
a different number, but we'll double check and get back to you in writing.
If I'm not mistaken, I believe the CIP pegs the amount that we have programmed at around 9.5. So I'm thinking
And
that's
how's it spent? What years?
20. There was programmed to be spent 2016, 2017, and 2018, and then a little bit more in 2020, I believe.
Okay.
The details are in the CIP.
And is this fund also receiving payments through amortized provision of the SDC law?
Pardon? One more time? I didn't hear.
Yes. Is this fund also receiving payments through amortized provisions of the SDC law?
Yeah. Remember there, yeah.
The island water and
yeah.
sewer?
Yeah, so that Senator
Development
Barnes, I
Fund.
think, was the one that asked if we could set up an amortization. So, to make it easier,
Yes.
it's $8 grand is what we looked
Right,
at for
right.
a typical house. So is it 5 years, 10 years, Greg? What?
I believe it's 10 years.
Okay.
Yes.
So we can really spread it out for people too. So think of it this way: from now on, we're spending money we gained from 10 to 14 and 17, 18, and 19. On a going forward basis, we're going to get that money over 10 years, and we may
And
not spend it for 10 years, right?
And you're able to, the processing time for this, is it reasonable time for those that are looking to be a part of this program, like a month, 2 months? How long do they have to wait? before it's processed.
I assume when they
as
sign up with
individuals.
customer service, they're allowed to, they just work out a payment agreement, right? We have a
Right.
process.
Okay, thank you. And how much in receivables is GWA due from these amortized
You can get back to that if you know.
payments?
Can I get back to you on that? I don't recall offhand how much the outstanding balance is right now.
Okay, and then can I also get the value of the income over time, the income stream over time?
Okay.
Because I'm thinking, right?
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
Take notes.
Do you guys have any questions about? Okay. Okay, this is a little bit lengthy.
No problem.
In the PUC's decision and order approving the system development charge, the administrative law judge noted the listed assumptions in item 4A4, and one of the assumptions for setting would reduce the system development charge at the level in the schedule is that the ongoing leak detection and pipe replacement program was that non-revenue water losses to 15% by 2018. Also, they refer to the system development charge being greatly impacted by high water losses and leak detection activities. Can you expand on that? Can you explain that? Do we have a copy for the PUC decision order for the CCU?
You're Senator, I'm sorry. You're reading from the order that established the system development charge?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Do you know the number you're referring to, Senator, in the order?
Item 4A4.
Under ordering provisions or where? What would be the heading? Their determinations and their ordering provisions, and
Okay,
then,
let me find that.
or could you tell us the page number? Oh, okay, page 3.
It is.
So I think that's in approving the rate. This is their reason why. So this is their record, right? This is the whole.
Can we clarify that page? Page
Yeah,
3.
page 3.
Okay.
We have it now. You know, this is a stipulation. And
Yeah.
go ahead.
So,
if you want.
no, go ahead.
No.
You know this stuff as good as I do. It's a stipulation. It's a stipulation. So the administrative law judge is briefing the PUC on why he's going to make his recommendation for the reason he's going to make them, and he provides the background. And oftentimes in these rate cases, the parties can come together and say, okay, we beat up the numbers, we agree on this, we don't agree on that, but they compromise and reach some agreement that's called basically a stipulation. So the rate consultant for the PUC, which I think was Georgetown at this time, right, Fred? I think so. And the GWA team, I'm sure Greg was involved with it. We had done the cost of service study, and the PUC consultant beat it up and came up with the rates that we're charging now. This language is kind of saying the stipulation, everyone's going to agree to try to do all of these things. And as a result, I guess he recommended, all of this is just sort of the assumptions that led to the agreement, right? And then he's also documenting there was public comment, and then he does some analysis, and then he recommended, what did he do? Review? He recommended the PUC's approval will allow GWA to establish and implement an SDC system as required by statute. And that was done in November 9. So that was his report to the PUC, and then the PUC would adopt an order. I don't know if they adopted the exact language. I don't know if they changed it. You can see if you keep turning, there's a stipulation signed by Georgetown's attorney and GWA's attorney. So that's part of the record that the administrative law judge said, hey, the parties went at it, beat up the numbers, and this is what they agreed to, this is the stipulation, this is the basis for the numbers that you're being asked to approve. And the administrative law judge lays out the whole story, the history, and then makes his recommendation. And I'm just going to assume that since the system development charge has been imposed, they adopted the recommendation of the ALJ. So, you know, hindsight's 20/20. When you're there, you're thinking, okay, what can we do? How fast it's going to do? How well can we get these numbers down? And you make your best call. And then that call got a price. And for the sake of discussion, the typical system development hour now for a single-family house is $3,000 for water, $5,000 for wastewater. And some of that came from the assumption that we would get water losses down faster than we actually have, right? And that was the assumption made in 2009, 7 years ago. 7 years later, we know our water loss isn't where we would like it to be. We still are using the system development charge for all the other reasons that you do use it for. If the PUC or GWA wanted to change it, I think the PUC can't do it unilaterally. If GWA wanted to change it, we could petition. The PUC could say, hey, can you review the prices again? I mean, all of those are tools that the PUC has or GWA has, but for now, we've just been implementing it since it was adopted in late 2009. We started in 10. 7 years later, we got $9 million that we'll spend in the next 3 years. And that's how it's worked from there.
Okay, so can we move forward to rates? The rates that just to cover operations and maintenance, you stated in the past that there is a 1.0 debt service ratio, right? Plus industry standard to cover capital needs for system expansion, which is another 0.25. And so totaling it would be 1.25. But the PUC allowed a target of 1.75 to cover the bonds needed for stipulated orders, right? So in the testimony in February, when we were in the previous meetings, we received that the current ratio is now 2.35. I'm trying to understand if GWA and the CCU requested these rates to meet the PUC's target of 1.75 debt service ratio. So how did we get that far ahead to 2.35?
Okay, first off, and correct me if I'm wrong, but let's start with this. The bond covenants, and correct me if I'm wrong, require a debt service coverage of 1.25. That's where that number comes from.
Right.
That's required by the bond covenants. In addition to that, the PUC, and we actually came when we were there, sets the ratio at 1.75. It does this for a number of reasons. For one thing, you don't want to ever fall below the 1.25, so you set it high at 1.75. As you go forward in life, sometimes your rates generate more money, your expenses don't quite line up to where you thought they were, or else you're able to do things and you realize some cost savings. Those things all come in, and so being that the rate can go up to 2.2, what is it? 2.3 or
2.35.
2.25.
Okay.
It can also drop back down to 1.75. So it depends, and that's why you don't set it at just this and say that's the rate, and you'll hit it all the time. Okay, so the rates are geared towards 1.75. The actual results depend on how the revenues come in, how the expenditures go out.
So what happens, the good news is this, we are having great coverage, we're having revenues greater than our expenses, right? But our current debt service right now is how much, Greg? 20 million? 22 million. When all the borrowing is done, remember there's one more borrowing this year, the debt service in 2 years will be what? 32 million. And then you got to add 25% on top of that. That's 8 million. So we're about to go from 24 million to $40 million in 3 years. Guess where that 2.3 is going to go? It's going to start going down towards the 175. So the rate design that we use for how we got the rates that we're now implementing this 5-year rate plan, right? And you know, the rate increases have been going on since 2004, and we figured out how to generate rates and enough cash flow to borrow this 480 million to build all this stuff, right? And so what you're seeing is, and the chair is right, when we projected this in 2013, we thought the power bill would be a lot higher, because back then it was. Well, it's not. So one of the things last year was we were supposed to ask for a 7% rate increase. We only asked for a 3.5% rate increase. I'm asking, you know, we're asking this team, can we avoid this year's 4% rate increase, because then we are more robust than projected. We're guessing in 2013 what we thought the world would be like in 2017. Frankly, I'm kind of glad we've exceeded expectations, because we can temper some of that rate adjustment. But when we borrow money, we have capitalized interest for 2 years, and then the whole principal and interest kicks in. So the way we design the rates is if the rates go up a little bit this year, next year, by the 3rd year, you have the cash flow for the additional debt service, versus you can wait nothing, and then year 3 just punch people in the nose. And we don't do it. We haven't done it that way anyway. The PUC has approved that spread it out. How do you borrow $600 million and pay the debt service? You got to spread it out. So that's the rate design. So what you're looking in time, right, this moment in time, GWA's cash flow is strong. It is in position to borrow that money, that last 90 million. We just went to the rating agencies. We're investment grade, and we're going to say, give us that last 90 million at 4%, 3%, as low as we can do it. And 2 years from now, the principal will need to be paid. And that's where we go from 22 million to 32 million, and that's just the principal. We need that 25% on top of that, so you're going to go to 40 million, right? So that 235, when you're in your 3rd term and we're back with you, I think you'll see that debt service coverage below 175, and I think we're going to try to get it there, because you know we don't want to take any more money from ratepayers than absolutely necessary, but you need a cushion over 125, and we're in this big growth and borrowing phase. But after this year, we hope we can catch our breath, build all this stuff, finish it, and then think about what's next, right?
So you were mentioning the debt service at 24 million a year, and then we're anticipating that it's going to increase to 32 million a year, and then you were talking about a 20%. Can you just, for the record, what's the 20%, that 8 million?
Okay, so remember the PUC will give you, the bond covenants, as the chairman said, we must have cash flow that is at least 1.25. More than debt service. So if our debt service is 32 million, the bond covenants require us to have rates that generate 1.25. 25% of 32 million is 8. 32 plus 8 is 40 million. So basically our debt service is at 22 will double in 2 years, 2 to 3 years, right? So, but we don't want to wait till 3 years and hit everybody. We phase it in, but the last rate increase we cut in half. We might be able to say, no rating, this last rate increase, nothing. We're going to try. We're going to try.
And that'll come down, information for that decision will come down in July, correct?
Well, in May,
We're anticipating.
no, in May is when the CCU and working with management comes up with their best number. It's a true-up process
Right.
for a rate increase on October 1st. So what we do is in May, we start the true-up process. These are our best numbers. We give it to the PUC in June. They start to work on it, beat it up and everything, and as we go forward, that'll become clearer and clearer.
But you will see our proposed number
But you'll
in
see our
May.
propo-
We have to
in May.
approve
I see.
something
Yeah.
to
Okay.
send to them.
Right.
Then we work together on it and see what happens. And they have that updated. They get June, July, August more results. You know, that helps them and help.
It's almost, think of it this way. You see our current debt service coverage at 2.25 or 2.3, but what you don't see is the bond borrowing we did in 2016. The impact of that debt service hasn't kicked in yet. That doesn't kick in until 2018. Then when we borrow towards the end of this year, that debt service will kick in 2 years later. So the debt service coverage climbs. You start to pay the bonds. It starts to drop. It climbs again, and drops. Now, that's where the last 4% comes in. We need to look at that. How is that going to affect us? We were very successful in 2016 when we went out to the bond market. I don't know if we'll do that again. To me, I looked at that, and in hindsight, I said, boy, we were very lucky. We were very fortunate. We borrowed $143 million. We actually got out $140 million for projects. That's unique. What that tells you is the bond buyers paid a premium. They paid a premium for their bond. They paid more, you know. And so therefore, but that was a unique circumstance. Right now, the world economy and the way bonds are working, we're not sure. So that will depend as we go forward. At the end of this year, when we float that bond issuance, that's going to tell us, oh, you're not going to get us good a deal. In fact, what we did is in 2016, we borrowed more money. We were, what was the number, Miguel? We were supposed to take out in 2016.
I think it was just a touch.
We was. But what were we
The
expecting?
proceeds, I think,
161.
were from
What was the proceeds
120.
161?
Yeah,
Okay. So we were.
an extra 12 million.
Huh?
An extra 12
We got
million.
an extra $12 million than we thought we weren't going to get. So that actually helps us in the ballgame. You know, but we don't know how that'll play out. We have to, a lot of different moving parts. One, we're working on updating our master plan. That helps us to crystallize what we need to do, the remaining items, make sure the court order projects are covered, make sure everything else that we need to do is covered, go out and borrow the money, and at that point we'll see how much the interest rate is, and we'll get a better picture in 2 more years what we're going to need. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay, so now let's transition over to operation and maintenance.
Sure.
Okay, so I guess that's you, Mr. Verdalio. You're looking to hire 59 additional full-time employees. Is that going to impact the rates that we will pay for this 59 additional full-time employees?
The 59 additional employees was a target. We have spread that out over the current fiscal year. It's already built into the rates that we have for this
Now,
fiscal
currently?
year. Yeah. So it's not going to cause an increase.
Okay, but when upon hiring them, and it looks like would the operation cost increase by like several $1 million?
The expenses have already been budgeted for a part of our budget for this fiscal year, so they're not going to increase significantly anything beyond that.
Sure.
And in
Thank
fact,
you.
they may be a little less. I mean, we've targeted 59 total. We have a certain number slated for first quarter, a certain number slated for second quarter.
Right.
We've tried to fill those positions. We're still trying to fill those positions, but they haven't come in the time that we've indicated. So we actually, when it's all said and done, we get to the end of the fiscal year, we will be under what we projected we would be expending for those positions.
Okay.
I don't have my binder in front of me, but I thought that those increase in positions were supposed to offset a contract or like a management contract that you're currently paying for, and
No.
that's not.
No, I mean, I think you may be referring to the program management office contract, and the knowledge transfer and the improvement of our core employees is intended to allow us to undertake more of what that PMO is currently doing. But related to that, they are also assisting us with the project workload. So we could not have a PMO and try and staff up to handle the extent of CIPs that we're trying to undertake right now, but then once those projects get built, then we're overstaffed. So we have our core staff, and then we're using the PMO to help us to handle the extra workload necessitated by these CIP projects that we have to undertake. But when they go away, the PMO goes away. So the intent is to maximize the knowledge transfer and the skill sets from the PMO to our own employees, which we're doing through a training program and interaction with them on projects, working together side by side on projects. And then as we get better at it, we reduce the amount of work that we need them to do for us as we move forward. And we already have a transition plan that's in place to phase out the PMO services over the next several years. We've submitted that to the PUC for their review and comment.
That transition plan, when did you submit that?
I believe it was in December, end of December,
All right. Okay.
December 31st.
Okay, thank you. This is towards a little bit more towards development. I know we're jumping from category to category, but this is essentially going to be our last briefing, so I want to make sure that we wrap this up. There were 4 towers built in Oka. They were called the Oka Towers, built by UNEX. And from my understanding, that there was some kind of permit that was given to UNEX to improve the, whatever impacts that the development would have had, right? Can you please explain a little bit about that? And was there a reimbursement of the lines that they laid down, or any kind of reimbursement that went back to UNEX for the project that they've done?
So I believe you're referring to the Emerald Ocean View Towers, not Oka Towers. It's similarly located, but totally separate property.
Okay, thank you.
So the Emerald Ocean View Towers initially was developed by UNEX. They submitted for a zone variance, I believe, to the Land Use Commission. And as part of that process, one of the conditions for their, couple of conditions for their application for them to receive the variance was to put in off-site infrastructure to benefit the Jonestown area. So there was a water line that was put in, and I guess to note, there was perennial low pressure in the Jonestown area. So this was intended to alleviate that prior to their connection to the system. So it was water and wastewater, and both of those projects, or both of those pieces of infrastructure, were put into place by UNEX prior to their application for the building permit for their tower project. And that was agreed by them, and it was very unique at the time. They put it in ahead of time.
Okay. And there was no reimbursement given back?
There was never intended to be a reimbursement for that.
Okay, thank you. There was never intended, or there never was?
Neither.
I'm sorry?
That's their impact
That
fee.
was the condition for
Yeah.
their receiving
Water
their
from
zoning
us.
variance.
And receiving water from us.
Okay,
Yeah.
very good. Okay, so can we move over to lifeline rates? Residential versus commercial as it applies to rate making. Please explain the definition of residential versus commercial categories of the ratepayer. For example, like you mentioned meter size and so forth. So,
Difference in rate classes, residential class, commercial. How do you differentiate? How do we differentiate?
We have, the residential class, there's the residential class, and then there's the commercial class, government, and irrigation and agriculture, I believe, are the classes in our current tariff.
so are condominiums and apartment buildings considered commercial or residential?
Commercial.
They're considered commercial, okay. Will you be able to prepare an analysis for revenue neutral options where lifeline rates could apply only to means tested qualified ratepayers and residential units, whether single family homes, duplexes, apartment buildings, or condominiums are all charged residential rate?
Senator, maybe to help you better understand what it is we do, you have to understand that if you build one house, that requires certain pressure, certain different things. And if you look at Jonestown, that's a good example. You have all those houses. Now that Cliffline project, where Emerald City is proposed to be built, and they've scaled it back, that Cliffline project, if it had stayed just for houses, they would have probably built another 20 houses there. And that would have been very easy to accommodate with what we have. But when you now take it, and instead of 20 houses, you put in 400 units or 300 units, that's a whole different dynamic. And that's why you don't have the same impact between a condominium building and a bunch of houses. Okay? The condominium building doesn't get a 3/4 inch meter because it can't survive with a 3/4 inch meter. Not enough water will go through. So it gets a 2-inch meter. That means that's a whole different dynamic. If you have nothing but 3/4 inch meters all over Jonestown, that's different from the Alupan Cove condominium tower that has to have a 2-inch or larger, I don't know what they have, but probably a 2-inch water pipe that comes in. And that's a different dynamic in terms of pressure and everything else. So you can't equate them. You can't say, so we want that one condominium at Alupan Cove to pay the same thing as that house in Jonestown. It doesn't work like that. Okay?
Thank you.
These system development charges, where you said were set by the PUC in 2010, 3,000 for water, 6,000 for wastewater.
That's an example of the typical charge for a typical single-family house. There's actually 10 or 12 rates depending on the size of the meter.
That's what I was going to ask. And are there exceptions? And do you foresee any changes to these rates, those rates?
I mean, we haven't thought about revisiting the rates. We're just trying to get the money spent now, you know.
I do, just to share with you, I've been receiving a lot of concern since we started this informational briefing, from a lot of ratepayers and people that are trying to build their homes specifically. And their concern is the installation charge, and also the additional charge, which is the connection fee. Is that it? It's the meter?
Meter charge.
The meter charge. So sometimes when they want to build their home, I understand you guys have a requirement of a 6-inch pipe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of like your installation charge, a 6-inch pipe is maybe 100 to 200 feet away from their home, and there's a specific property in the middle of this, and then the house that they'd like to build is on the other end. And essentially they'd have to pay somewhere, I'll give just a direct example, somewhere in the thousands, $40,000 for this installation charge to meet the requirement of the 6-inch pipe that you guys have in, as your requirement. But, and you probably know, what constituent I'm talking about, because they've come to your board, I'm sure. And then at the far end, the 6-inch pipe is not required to run along all the way to the end where their property is. So the reason why I bring this up, because GPA, right? When you are running power to your house and there's, essentially you're paying for it, and then other people want to hook up, there's a reimbursement back to the individual.
Even GWA.
With GWA, they also have a similar system.
So one of the questions that why do we have to charge them? One, there's a cost to the meter, right? And this stuff's not free. And then you have the system development charge. So I asked the ratepayer, Mr. Sanchez, it's expensive, and I asked them, well, who should pay for your meter if you don't pay for your meter?
Right.
The other ratepayers? They paid for their own meter. So from an equity point of view, we just say, unfortunately, life has costs. One of the costs is when you hook a structure up to GWA, there's a cost. There's a cost for the meter, there's a cost to set it up, and there's a system development charge, which we even amortize. We'll loan you the money. We'll do it out over 10 years, okay?
Right.
But if you don't pay that cost, then everyone else has to pick up that cost. And what we inherited in 2002 was all these bad practices that presume that, well, if we just make everyone else pay for it, there'll be enough money. And what we've painfully learned is we're 20 years behind spending $600 million. We're way behind. We should have had this system 20 years ago, but we don't. So we're getting it now. But that unfortunately, as I used to say, and I've been doing this for a long time, I've gone through a lot of rate cases. We've gone to the villages. When we go to Payless to buy the chicken, we got to pay for the chicken. The Payless can't give it to you for free. This is the people's water system. We all own it, but that means if we're going to if you're going to join the system, and you need a meter, can you pay for your meter? Otherwise, we've got to ask the other 43,000 people to pay for your meter. So should the next 10,000 people get a free meter and we charge it to the 43,000? Why? That's not fair to them. So that's why we have to charge them. We try to help it out by amortizing the system development charge is a big thing. But, you know, if you're building a house, 50, 80, 100, and more than 100,000, you know, sometimes you got to put that money aside. You can't afford 8,000 spread out over 10 years to help pay for the system that will be there to ensure that as Guam grows, everyone has enough pressure and can dispose of wastewater, you know, safely. That's what we try to, that's the whole logic and sort of the concept we try to execute. We're not perfect at it. We have some challenges, but overall, that's how it works. And if you look at other good utilities, credit-worthy, strong cash flow, they charge for the meter. They charge a system development charge. So do we want to be best practices, or do we want to have the water system that most of us grew up with, where in 2002 we almost lost the system? So we've had to adopt some best practices that we learned from other successful utilities. They seem to be working. We're stronger. The people's water system is financially strong. It's not Puerto Rico. It's not any of those Virgin Islands. We're credit worthy, and we're rebuilding a system for everybody that when 2021 is done and this first phase is done, I think we'll be very proud. Will there be more work to do? Absolutely. This master plan that we're going to do this year will tell us what the next headaches are going to be, but that's the nature of the beast. That's what you do in government and we do in utilities. When you leave office, there's going to be plenty of work for somebody else to keep going. That's how we approach it.
Okay. That just goes along with saying that, you know, my understanding of the intent of the law was let me just make sure I say this right. The Island Water and Wastewater Sewer Development Fund was to help those, you know, that were with the installation charges, you know, directly. And so that's why I bring it up.
Why do you say that, Senator? I don't think that's accurate.
Well, just because of the wording in the law. So I was just thinking that perhaps there was a way that, you know, that GWA helps first-time, you know, users or first-time builders.
Well,
with the
we
installation
amortize
charges.
it out, but if we're to reduce the cost, we're just transferring that cost to the existing ratepayers. How is that fair to them?
Okay.
I mean, you know, 1,000 houses from now, we're going to regret not putting aside some money for that growth. And that's what happened. That's the system. That's what led to the collapse of the system that we almost lost. You know, we were trying to do it with no money. You know, rates were super low. We didn't attract good management. We weren't running it right. Mm-hmm. And now we have something that's running better. Is water more expensive? Yes, it is, unfortunately. But it's safer. It's cleaner. We're not Puerto Rico. You can rely on it. And you know, we're hoping to, and we're building stuff. You know, we're putting the ratepayer money to work. So we're trying our best.
Is there anybody that has any questions or would like to provide any insight here today? Okay. Well, I'd like to thank you, gentlemen, for enduring this
Senator.
long informational briefing process. I'm very grateful for, you know, your continued support and your cooperation. So we will have a committee report come out within the month, and we'll also, you know, transmit it to PUC and to you as well. So I would like to thank GWA officials and members of the CCU for taking the time to participate in the series of informational briefings this committee has organized. It is now 6:27 p.m. Thank you all and have a good evening.